if a parent misgenders their child, meaning refers to them by their gender at birth or dead names, calling them by their old name, it could be considered a form of coercive control, and that could impact custody decisions.
They're coming after your kids, and it's officially no longer an exaggeration or alarmism to say so. We're going to break down a truly disturbing story out of Colorado, plus the White House trolling reporters, and one of the hosts of The View floating another wacky theory, plus so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, we got to talk about Colorado, because Democrats in that state, and they control the state legislature and have a Democratic governor, are pushing through legislation that is actually really alarming and concerning. They're trying to take your kids away if you misgender them. I know that sounds like hyperbole, that sounds like exaggeration, but it's not. It's what a new bill would do. Take a listen to this reporting from Fox News.
Hi, Harris. This Colorado House bill, if signed into law as written, would mean if a parent misgenders their child, meaning refers to them by their gender at birth or dead names, calling them by their old name, it could be considered a form of coercive control, and that could impact custody decisions. From the bill summary, quote, a court shall consider reports of coercive control when determining the allocation of parental responsibilities in accordance with the best interests of the child. One of the sponsors of this bill says this is about protecting the child's best interests and the rights of parents who support the child's gender identity. House Republicans in the minority here call it misguided and a threat to parental rights.
I believe it's misguided. It fundamentally oversteps the proper role of government. It threatens parental rights. It raises serious constitutional issues. This is not protecting children. It's weaponizing the courts against parents.
And this is how a Democratic lawmaker responded to a complaint that family rights groups not associated with LGBTQ rights were not given more of a say.
We heard from groups that called trans community members groomers and pedophiles. I will call those groups hateful. I will compare that to saying it's like asking someone working on civil rights legislation to consult with white supremacist groups.
This bill now goes to the state Senate before heading to Colorado Governor Jared Polis's desk. Harris?
Wow, the comparison there of the groups that oppose transitioning kids and punishing parents who don't go along with it to white supremacists or the KKK or whatever. Yeah, that comparison's a bit much, a bit absurd, a bit far-fetched, but can't say it's particularly surprising for how overheated the rhetoric gets in this debate. Now, if you know me, if you know my channel, if you know my perspective, you know that I don't support at all medically transitioning minors, and I think that really they need to wait and go through puberty and wait and see if this kind of thing persists, and then maybe transition as adults if it's right for them. But I'm totally against this. But regardless, look, I have some sympathy for parents who went to the doctor told them, oh, you have to do this for your kid, or your kid will unalive themselves, or whatever it may be, and went along with this. But what I cannot get behind, and what I really struggle to even understand how anyone, let alone all these Democratic lawmakers in Colorado and many other blue states, how they could feel this way, is the notion that this is such a simple issue. You have to affirm your child's gender identity no matter what. You have to use pronouns. You can't misgender. You can't do any of this. And if you disagree, you're not just wrong. We don't just disagree with you. You're not just, problematic. We're going to try to take your kids away using the legal system and custody battles, framing it akin to a form of abuse. We're going to get into the details of this, and honestly, it only gets worse, and we'll go over all of it after this. Guys, the internet regularly makes me want to crash out.
Here you can see my gay puppy flag.
But I'm able to deal with the stress without falling into bad habits like vaping, thanks to today's sponsor, Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that delivers great taste without any harmful chemicals. Instead of inhaling vapor, you simply breathe in natural, non-toxic flavors that satisfy the craving without the downside. I just tried the cinnamon hearts flavor, and it's my new favorite, but there are so many flavors that there's something there for everybody. I also love my Fume because its sleek design is built for people with ADHD brains broken by the internet. It's perfect to fidget with and makes all these satisfying noises when you're you're fussing with it. Check out Fume today so you can join me in dealing with the chaos of the modern world without falling into bad habits. Go to tryfume.com/Brad Polumbo, the link on screen or in the description, or just use the QR code on screen and promo code Brad Polumbo. Get your free Fume topper when you order a journey pack today. You'll be glad you did. Now back to today's show. For more on this really radical legislation out of Colorado, we're going to go to Reality's Last Stand, the blog written by my friend Colin Wright, who covers these issues closely from a critical perspective. He writes, "Instead of ensuring children's safety, this bill would mandate speech, codify a radical ideology into law, and weaponize family courts to enforce compliance." That's the thing. Enforcing compliance really is what they're talking about here. That you must use certain pronouns for your child. By the way, it's not even just limited to traditional transgender issues where like a young male feels trapped in the wrong body, wants to be a girl. This would also, on its face, include people with fairy pronouns and they them pronouns and zer pronouns and all this made up stuff that has, unlike gender dysphoria, which however you feel about it is a real medical condition that people have experienced for a long time. Oh no. This would presumably include everything, all the stuff they've just made up recently and suddenly discovered. But Colin gets into more detail here. It's really alarming stuff. The bill is framed in terms of preventing harm and abuse, which relies on the popular claim that gender-affirming care is a form of suicide prevention. Despite the frequency with which such claims get repeated, no good evidence suggests that gender-affirming treatments, social transition, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, surgeries are grounded in rigorous evidence-based medicine. On the contrary, every systemic review conducted to date has concluded that the evidence supporting these interventions is of very low quality. This is such an important point because you hear this all the time. This stuff is safe and effective. This stuff is life-saving. And to be fair to the activist types or just your average liberal, they were told this by the experts, right? The medical groups, the medical associations did parrot that line. But it wasn't true. It was a result of ideological capture and groupthink and actual reviews of the evidence, like they did at the University of York, like they did as part of the Cass review in the UK, have found very, very minimal low-quality evidence on this issue and really no high-quality evidence proving any of these claims they make about how life-saving it is. So this is not a similar situation to where, you have a custody dispute and one parent wants to deny a child life-saving healthcare for their cancer. It's not like that. It's a very complicated political, social, moral, scientific debate about how to best handle a child going through something potentially really difficult and really messy and really complicated. But this new legislative push from Democrats in Colorado, supported by activist groups around the country, leaves no room for that nuance. It declares parents with concerns dangerous bigots who need their kids taken away. That's psychotic. It's insane. It is breathtakingly radical. But in Colorado, it actually could soon become the law, and other blue states have moved forward with similar things. More information here from Colin. The Kelly Loving Act would punish such parents and reward those who set their child on an irreversible path of lifelong medicalization. On April 2nd, the bill cleared the State House's Judiciary Committee with all 7 Democrats voting in favor and all 4 Republicans in opposition. On April 6th, it passed the full State House with overwhelming Democratic support. It now moves to the State Senate, where Democrats hold a 23-12 edge. If the bill clears the Senate, it will land on the desk of Governor Jared Polis, who has signed similar legislation simplifying the process for changing sex on IDs and banning so-called conversion therapy with respect to gender identity, which prevents gender clinicians from questioning patients' transgender identity and trying to make them comfortable in their natural bodies. So it looks like this is on the fast track to becoming law in Colorado. Colin concludes, if Polis signs the bill, Colorado will enshrine into law the notion that protecting a child from irreversible and unnecessary medical treatments constitutes abuse. This is precisely the opposite of the truth. Kids with gender dysphoria and the parents who refuse to lie to them deserve better. I agree with Colin. This is madness. The idea that the state is going to come in and punish parents with concerns about their kids' gender identity or who don't just want to affirm pronouns and new names and everything, no matter the situation, is insane. It is really, really shocking stuff that leaves no room for nuance or shades of gray. And frankly, I think will put people on the defensive. It'll be an outrage. I mean, I find it hard to believe that there aren't Democrats in the state Senate who will put up a fuss about this, but actually that's probably the case. That's probably where we're at now. In a lot of these state legislatures, most of the Democratic lawmakers are either bought in on this in terms of their ideology, or they're not, like they know it's absurd, but they're very scared of the activist groups coming after them, so they'll just go along with it anyway. The one question I have is that governor in Colorado, Jared Polis, is somebody who has some moderate views on many issues. When it comes to economics and tax cuts and spending, he seems like a good governor and says a lot of moderate, common sense things. And he is, I think, the first openly gay governor. But if anything, to me, that means he should understand how harmful this is, because a lot of these kids being pushed down this trans or gender identity pipeline are really just kids who would probably grow up to be gay, but instead they go down this pipeline, and once you go into it, you don't really come out of it. So is Governor Polis really this far gone? Like, is he really this radical on social issues that he would endorse something like this? That he'd sign it into law? I hope not, but I fear that he will. I fear that it may become the law in Colorado, and that way, madness lies. But it's happening in Colorado, it's happening in other blue states, and this is why we have such an intense culture war in this country. And this is why so many people who, have concerns about MAGA, aren't right-wing, still don't support the Democrats. Because on issues like this, their side is radical. Their side is totally out of touch with common sense and reality. So sometimes people will talk to me and will be criticizing Trump or have some issue with the Republicans, and they'll be like, how could you not support Democrats? Look at this stuff like this. They don't believe biology exists. They ignore the science and the evidence on issues like childhood medical transition, and they want to use the state to enforce their ideology. That is in many ways a mirror image of the kind of right-wing authoritarianism they always complain about, and is scary and alarming in its own right. So it's not a shocker that people aren't going to flock to the party that supports that kind of madness just because they're not fully on board with what the other side does either. That's why people like me just end up feeling politically homeless. But anyway, this legislation in Colorado, I think it should be challenged in court. It's got to be somehow unconstitutional or illegal to just trample on parental rights like this. But regardless, I imagine that rank and file Coloradans, whatever the word may be, don't support this or wouldn't support this if they knew all the details, even many Democrats and liberals. So I hope there's public awareness. I hope people speak out against it. And I hope this legislation can be stopped, if not in Colorado, at least before it spreads elsewhere, because this is going to make things worse. This is going to lead to way more backlash against the LGBT community, way more rejection of trans adults' rights to freedom, dignity, and acceptance, which I support, because when you start messing with people's kids, they are not going to tolerate that. When you start threatening people's custody, if they don't go along with things that are unproven and unsubstantiated until 5 minutes ago, no one really believed, they are not going to buy that. It is going to be a hard pass from so many Americans, and it's going to lead to more of this backlash that we've witnessed. So to me, it's an own goal, it's a moral perversion, and it's just more of the same from the activists and the fringe part of the Democratic Party, who's hijacked a lot of the mainstream momentum and seems determined to push this issue too far and drive the LGBT community off a cliff. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and please do consider hitting that like button or subscribing if you haven't yet. And by the way, guys, thanks to everyone who sent in voice notes. Remember, I'll put a link in the description. You can send me a voice note. Just tell me your name, tell me something about yourself, a crazy experience you had, ask me for some advice or ask me a question, and I'm going to be responding to them all in a bonus episode of the podcast real soon. So thanks to everybody who sent one in, and I'll look forward to go through more of them. The link will be in the description. Up next, the Trump administration is trolling journalists in a kind of hilarious but questionable way. The story here is about the press team at the White House, Caroline Leavitt and other people who interact with reporters and journalists, because they've announced a new policy where they will be ignoring any reporter who contacts them and has pronouns in their bio or their email signature, like she, her, they, them, he, him, which is always kind of like a red flag that this person is probably a pretty hardcore social justice liberal. Whenever I get an email with pronouns in bio, I give a little side eye. But yeah, this policy is quite something, that they'll be ignoring any media inquiry from people with the pronouns in the bio. Take a listen to this summary of the news from Sky News.
The White House will no longer respond to reporters who list their preferred gender pronouns in their email signatures. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has said that she doesn't respond to journalists with these sorts of pronoun announcements because, and I quote, "it shows they ignore scientific realities and therefore ignore facts."
So it won't surprise you that this is not going over well with mainstream media and many prominent journalists. The New York Times, for example, said in a statement, "Evading tough questions certainly runs counter to transparent engagement with free and independent press reporting," a Times spokesperson said in a statement. But refusing to answer a straightforward request to explain the administration's policies because of the formatting of an email signature is both a concerning and baffling choice, especially from the highest press office in the U.S. government. Meanwhile, journalist Jesse Singal wrote this on Twitter. "Remember how some of us on the left criticized fashionable leftism and liberalism for being obsessed with fundamentally meaningless symbolism at the expense of people's material well-being? Anyway, totally unrelated, that just popped into my head for some reason." And this was in response to the story that the Trump administration is refusing to respond to reporters who have pronouns in email signatures. So this kind of reminded me of the thing that Elon Musk did, where he set a auto reply to press inquiries to Twitter to just respond to journalists with a poop emoji. Yeah, seriously, that's a thing that happened. You can go back and look it up. But it's on one level funny. Okay, obviously, I think putting your pronouns in your bio is cringe. It is the kind of virtue signaling or signaling allegiance to a certain political tribe that makes many people understandably roll their eyes. But this level of trolling at the White House press office, to me, is kind of absurd and comes off as unserious. You don't have the right to dictate to reporters what they can put in their bio, and I certainly wouldn't be comfortable with, for example, a Democratic White House doing the opposite and saying, "We will only reply to reporters who have pronouns in their bios," and they could try to force the Fox News journalists who they take inquiries from. And despite what you may hear, they did take many inquiries from them during the Biden administration. Well, they're only going to respond to you if you put pronouns in your bio. So they're going to use their leverage as the White House to bully people into going along with the pronoun madness. I mean, if Trump's people can do this, then they can do that next time they're in charge. I just think maybe don't do this. Maybe don't die on this hill. Maybe focus on things that are more meaningful and substantive and improve people's lives rather than stuff that's funny. I mean, it's kind of hilarious, but it's petty. It's juvenile. It comes off as unserious. I mean, seriously, think about this. Places like the New York Times have complained that their reporters are being ignored because of this. And as much as the New York Times is obviously biased, as much as clearly they root for one side, a lot of them, they produce some ridiculous articles and stories and op-eds, there are still a lot of serious journalists at papers who cover the entire globe, who cover issues of national security, who have very highly ranked sources. You're telling me that if they contact the press office with a big story about national security, about some foreign affairs, about something involving a diplomat, something involving a top cabinet member, y'all are going to ignore it and not comment because of pronouns in the bio? That's ridiculous. Like, that's not serious. That's not the way to run a government. Now, you can say the pronouns are a joke, the pronouns are unserious, they should change, sure, but they don't have to. And you're the White House and you're the press office and you're supposed to be doing your job for the American people, even if that means dealing with people who you think are silly or who they still have millions of readers. They're still massively influential. So just ignoring them and try to control their speech like this, it's a stretch to me. It's kind of absurd to me, and I don't support it. It is, however, like so many of the things that Trump does that go too far, kind of hilarious. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Or are you with the Trump team on this one? Let me know in the comments. Up next, one of the hosts of The View, Sunny Hostin, just floated another wild take. Take a listen to her thoughts on why voter ID laws requiring you to show basic identification before you can vote are terrible and evil. It's quite something.
People don't have cars, don't have driver's licenses. So it's sort of a vestige of, I think, post-slavery laws where Black people had to prove their right to vote. And oftentimes they couldn't vote because they couldn't pass some crazy test or they didn't have the appropriate ID. It also affects women that are married. Maybe your passport reflects something that's different on your birth certificate or on your driver's license. So really the bottom line is voter suppression. And I agree with him 100%. It's a brilliant notion that less voter ID laws allows more people to vote. And most democracies do it that way. We're the only ones that really don't do it that way.
Really? Did she really just compare it to post-slavery laws, asking people to show an ID to vote? Guys, this is a policy that is common sense. It's overwhelmingly supported by everyday people. Independents, Republicans, and even a majority of Democrats, I believe, support voter ID, just not their progressive media figures and their politicians, but actual people on the street do, because it's common sense. And what is this nonsense about Black people not having IDs or not being able to get IDs? I don't know about y'all, but Black people that I've known have driver's licenses because they're Americans who need to drive. They go to R-rated movies. They buy vape products. They buy alcohol, all sorts of things that need IDs. Flying on planes, you need a form of ID. Like, what universe is she living in? And honestly, if to whatever extent there is an issue with people not being able to access IDs, the solution is not to not have voter ID. It's to help people get IDs. So maybe with your voter ID legislation, you pass laws or policies that also make it easier to access IDs if you're concerned about that. We still probably should have basic common sense laws that mean you have to prove you are who you say you are to cast a ballot, to vote in our system, our electoral system. Kind of seems like common sense, especially if you are on the left side of the aisle and you disagree, and I disagreed with them in 2020, with the notion that the elections are stolen or rigged. I don't think voter fraud is widespread, and I don't think it only goes in one direction. I think it happens on both sides. But if you want that to go away, or if you want to ameliorate that kind of anti-democratic pushback to elections, making elections seem less secure, even if it had no actual impact, which I'm sure it does have an impact, making it seem less secure by not even requiring an ID has the opposite of that effect. It plays into the hands of the Trump people, the Carrie Lakes of the world, who want to claim every election they lose is rigged when you don't even have basic common sense measures. It's all so absurd. They're so hopelessly out of touch, but people like this remain liberal icons in the media, and somehow a swath of the Democratic Party still thinks they are good representatives of their ideas and their ideology, which is something I truly just don't understand. Up next, even CNN can't keep up anymore with the woke stuff. Take a listen to this clip of Anderson Cooper accidentally misgendering a non-binary at a televised event with Bernie Sanders.
We're back with Senator Bernie Sanders. I want to introduce Grace Thomas. She's a local civil rights attorney. She's a Democrat. Grace?
They, them pronouns, actually. Thank you.
Oh.
Good evening, Senator Sanders. Polling and turnout data indicate that men of all racial demographics are turning away from the Democratic Party.
Guys, we just witnessed a hate crime. We just witnessed an act of violence on live television perpetrated by an evil, far-right Republican television host, Anderson Cooper of CNN. Look, it just shows to me, even when you have the gay liberal CNN hosts can't keep up with the ever-evolving ideology and the nonsense like non-binary, it just shows to me how far they've lost the plot. And it is funny because this is literally just a female, a biological female, who presents completely like a woman, deciding she's a they, them. She's not a woman. Why? What? Seriously, because, oh, well, I don't like traditionally feminine things. I don't like dresses or pink. Oh, so you're doing sex stereotypes again there, babe. You're doing sexism. It's okay to be androgynous. It's okay to not fit gender stereotypes. I will never be one of those boys don't cry, boys don't play with dolls, girls know your place, blah, blah, blah. I will never be one of those people. That's not me, okay? But it doesn't, just because you're different in your personality or your interests or your aesthetic, doesn't make you not a woman or not a man. And it's actually a regressive ideology that suggests otherwise. Not a progressive one. I don't know how many times I need to explain this before they start to get it. But again, when even CNN can't keep up with you on the liberal fringe, that's a sign. Maybe you don't make any sense. Just a thought. All right, guys, up next, a new TikTok protest tactic just dropped, and it's kind of absurd. Take a listen to this woman explaining how she's calling on everyone to stay home from work to protest Trump or something. Take a listen.
Protesting is great. I was there Saturday. I plan to be at the one next Saturday on the 19th. That's wonderful. But they are not going to care until we're doing that on a work day, until we stop going to work. Okay, we got to strike. I've seen a lot of videos going around today about it. Like, if you haven't already signed up, and I know you haven't because there's only 320,000 people that have signed up, but generalstrikeus.com, generalstrikeus.com, The link is in my bio. Sign up. We need 11 million people. Once 11 million people pledge to do it, and all agree that they will do it, we can do it. So, like, that's the only thing that's going to get to them. That's all they will listen to. Let's do it.
So, does she actually think this is a good idea? Does she actually think getting people to just not go to their jobs is somehow going to, like, own Trump or own Elon Musk? Because they're not going to care, babe. It's not going to be their supporters doing this, all right? And frankly, a lot of the people that would be susceptible to this message, the resistance TikTok types, a lot of them probably don't have jobs in reality, okay? So what are they going to stay home from? The library? The polycule book club or something? Like, come on now. There's this whole genre of TikTok where it's just like giving your followers terrible advice that I really wish would stop. Because when you have any sort of platform or any sort of audience, you should probably not recommend to the people that are making that possible for you things that will actively harm them. If anybody does get caught up in this, the most likely consequence is not Trump deciding to cancel Doge or something like that. It's y'all getting fired. It's y'all getting your wages docked. It's y'all getting in trouble at your jobs. Or, like, how is that a win? How is that a W? It's just not. It's terrible advice and just yet more evidence in the constantly expanding file of things showing that on TikTok, they're not coping well with our current moment. It's a chaotic moment for everyone, myself included, but I'd like to think I'm coping a little bit better than these folks. And you probably are too. All right, guys, that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please do consider subscribing if you haven't yet, or hitting that like button before you go. Do comment with your thoughts. I love hearing what you guys have to say. And thank you again to Fume for sponsoring today's video. And we'll talk again real soon.